Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob, and today I have 5 stories for you, all from the same OP that all tie together really nicely. This is in Tales from Tech Support, and the OP is called Lampeter Ranger. The first story is called The Epic of Bob, the printer who's allergic to paper. Let's jump right in. I'm not an IT professional, so I'm nowhere near the ability level of you guys. I'm an apprentice reprographer, and therefore deal exhaustively with that evil called printers. I am, however, the most computer literate person in the department, despite being a techie field, and the IT guys at work encouraged me to share this story. This means I get asked for help with everything from, I can't access the ordering system, which my workplace admins had accidentally blacklisted, to, the printer's on fire. We don't run Linux, so that worried me. But it was luckily a problem with a printing software, which unfortunately has fire in the name. Then there's Bob. Bob is my machine. There are many like him, but Bob is mine. Not really, he's one of a kind, but my boss is fond of the creed. I named Bob, and you can probably guess why. He's 5 years old, which is about as old as high-volume machines get, and he lets us know that with various little faults and niggles. He knows we're shopping for a replacement. The biggest of these niggles is that for a long time, we thought he was allergic to paper. It all started with a minor issue, something with staple alignment, minor but enough that my boss made me call printer support. They, in turn, with a couple of days delay, sent out an engineer. The engineer fiddled a bit, left, came back the next day with a part. Fitted the part, left. Sorted? Was it? Heck. Every job we printed after that jammed. Every job. Call printer company again. I'm informed that they'll come out and have a look as long as my boss doesn't at any point talk to the engineer. He's aggressive. They come out the next day, decide new part is faulty, come back 3 days later to replace it. Couple of test prints, all okay, but by that afternoon, Bob was playing up again. This went on for a couple weeks. We had 4 different engineers come in at various times, 20 different visits, sometimes 2 at a time. The stapler was replaced, the puncher, the motherboard, the this, that, and the other, over 50 different parts. Every time it would pass the test prints and go wrong a couple of hours later. We had a senior engineer watch me and my boss operating the machine to see if it was nothing we'd done. You know it's bad when you start buying in different teas and coffees because, preferred brands. Nothing worked. There are 37 separate operator-accessible paper clearing points on Bob's model, and he'd regularly jam in 36 of them, and a couple of other places for good measure. In between visits, we'd be advised to try and use him till the next critical jam. All through this process, my boss blamed me, since it happened around the time I started, the printer engineer, and God. I decided Bob was allergic to paper. We were scrapping as jam waste 8 times what he'd successfully print. We went through so much paper, our supplier upgraded us from a Christmas card to a gift basket. The engineers were out of ideas. My boss brought in a cricket bat and a baseball bat for me. Before Bob was dispatched, we gave him one last day to redeem himself. We were busy, and that means I decided to stick the scan jobs onto Bob, only to find that that part of Bob worked flawlessly. I mentioned this to the boss, who shrugged, and I ruminated on this for a while. Why could I scan and copy on Bob, but not print from electronic sources? It wasn't the job management software, it worked on the other machines. Eventually, I narrowed my target to the banner sheet. It would always jam between the banner sheet and the job proper. Sometimes elsewhere, but always there. Told the boss, who didn't believe it was possible. Told the engineer, who'd never heard of it before. He called colleagues, tried to explain it, couldn't or couldn't be arsed, got me to, and came up with precisely nothing. He left with the promise of consulting for a solution with head office. Meanwhile, I was being told to send anything and everything through Bob to work out tolerances. I actually managed to find a bodge fix, sending the banner sheet after. Simple as that, after all that work. Printer engineer decided this was good enough. We still haven't worked out a permanent solution, but I'm prouder than I should be of my trial and error. I've done more impressive support, fixing a binding machine, and working out why our job dispatching software was automatically doubling some jobs. But Bob, the little machine that still won't, is the boss's go-to reason for bothering me rather than actual IT. So I thought you might be interested. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Lost Selkie. It says, "It is my firm belief that the machines have already started to rise up against us, but we haven't noticed because they started by fielding the printers. I had a mini Bob at work once. One day, I returned from a coffee run to find Bob in the parking lot, where he'd ended up after a rapid descent from the second-story balcony, courtesy of the CEO. He got replaced by a new printer, and as a joke, the first print job I sent through was a picture of St. Augustine, which I then laminated and hung up above the new printer to protect it from evil. The hilarious thing is that the new one behaved perfectly. Easiest printer I've ever had to use, despite being the exact same model as Mini Bob. I don't know if it knew what happened to its predecessor, or if it was the holy benevolence of St. Augustine in a majority Catholic workspace, but that thing never gave us any trouble." This comment ties us right into our next story. This one is called The Frankenprinter. Don't trust the accountants. Let's jump right in. This is not a continuation of Bob's story. Bob is still a mystery, but thanks to whoever posted the St. Augustine suggestion, as that seems to have done more good than anything else we've tried, no, this is the Frankenprinter. I work in a college print shop with the high-performance printers, where we handle all the big jobs, anything that needs a lot of finishing, and anything staff are too lazy to handle themselves. In addition, there are smaller instruments of evil, office MFPs for each department. Maintenance for those is mostly IT's job. They handle software, networking, and stuff like that. We in Repro get a call before they call in the outside printer engineers, because we're trained to do some hardware fixes. Staff are trusted to change toners and paper themselves. This story is how I learned that may be too much rope for them. One particular problem keeps getting bounced from IT. It's user Mick, and he's either the laziest or most inept person on the planet. Toner rung out, ring IT and ask them to change it. IT says it's a Repro issue because Repro has the toners. Call Repro and ask them to come down and change it. Naturally, we refuse. As though we supply the toners, staff have previously complained we've mucked up their settings when we change them. It's their bed, they can lie in it. Mick doesn't like this and insists we come out. We let this go on for a while since Mick's colleagues usually sort the problem. Then Friday the 13th happens. I'm alone in my office on Fridays. Yes, me, an apprentice, is left alone for a day a week. My day started to be ruined when our paper delivery failed to arrive. We run out of paper to give staff and I put a note up. I leave for lunch and lock my office. Relevant A-side, if we have a lot of printing for the same person, I'll put it in a paper box, which is clearly marked with the staff member's name and department. I return to find two things. A paper box missing, no big, I guess someone picked it up using Nextdoor's spare key, and an urgent message from IT, "You gotta see this, it's a you problem, bye." Paraphrased, the reference was Mick's department office. This poor printer, it had red lights all over it and was making a funny noise. I opened it up, noting the lack of any error numbers. Just call service rep. This is not normal. I open the toner bay. I find a toner for a completely different printer stuck in there, and they are not interchangeable. It's made a mess of the whole bay, but somehow it is dispensing toner. I clean up what I can, make a note of the shattered plastic, and prepare to call the engineers for a conversation that will cost me dignity and the college $5,000. But I knew there must be more, seeing as it had been reported to IT that it was printing 2 jobs on 1 page, which is downright weird. I opened the scanner unit to find a massive gouge taken out of the glass plate. Unsure of how that happened, I logged that too. That doesn't solve the 2 sets issue. Unless a horrible thought occurred, they weren't using new paper. No, I thought, they can't be that stupid. I open up the paper cassette, and what I find was worse than I could have imagined. 1, the rollers are not the ones they should be. Evidently, the accountants have reached a level of confidence where they are now replacing parts themselves, which would be great if it was the right brand, or even size. 2, they're using paper which they've nicked from my office. Paper that has already been printed. Surely they must have noticed. Evidently not. Their stolen paper worked fine up until they reached the stapled sheets, which has gummed the machine right up. I give up after 20 minutes of trying to pick stapled paper out of the inner workings, as they've made it surprisingly far. I replaced the rollers and the waste toner unit, bodged water bottle, so they're 2 less things for the engineer to cry about. My final job is to gather the serial code and fault codes for the engineer. Serial code was easy enough, but fault code? Good lord, did the printer have a sense of humor? Instead of displaying an error code, it displayed the name of the last user to send a job, and therefore, it's murderer, Mick the accountant. Today, we had a reckoning. Engineer was here for 5 hours. We were honest, told him the full story. He was honest, told us we were screwed. He did what he could, then arranged for a pickup for Frankenprinter. The accountants have voided the lease, and it'll cost about $5,000 to get a new printer. Guess we will respond to change toner jobs from now on. I think I'm beginning to understand that IT isn't just about fixing equipment, but it's about fixing users and trying to make them understand how things work. But with some people, well, you just can't fix stupid. Let's see what happens in part 2. We have update on the Frankenprinter. Let's jump right in. Lots of you asked for an update on whether Mick the accountant lost his job. Sorry, it's a bit delayed, but well, we've had Ofsted inspectors in, regulatory body for education, and the teachers have been stressed out, which makes my life not worth living, seeing as waste flows downhill, and I'm at the bottom of a valley. Mick the accountant still has a job, for now. This is because they decided that the full facts of the case are even worse than the Frankenprinter. He also, amazingly, remains unmurdered. 1, the job he was printing was basically a how-to guide to tax evasion. We discovered this when he was ordered to send all printing, no matter what, through us. 2, this illegal how-to guide contained large portions of a guide for accountants on how to spot tax evasion. This breaks the Copyright and Licensing Act 1988. And makes both him and the college liable to a big fine if caught. 3, he broke the Frankenprinter's replacement, beyond repair, in less than 24 hours. We're not sure how he did it. A cigarette was apparently involved, but not how you would think. But the printer company have declined to replace it even on a full-service contract. They're also reviewing the rest of their premises contract. One man is making a company question a mega lucrative contract. So there you go, our policies are also changing. No more coming in while I'm out. I have to eat my lunch at my desk and we're not getting cameras. But they are paying for new handy dandy boxes for large print jobs so they don't look like paper boxes. Though only an idiot can't tell the difference. Best of all, I have to do a presentation at the next all-staff meeting on safe use and care for photocopiers. I have a care and feeding slideshow, and with IT's help to move a copier on stage, I'm borrowing a 7-year-old cousin to prove it's so easy, even a child can manage better than them. So if I'm to understand correctly on this one, OP is being forced to stay at their desk so that people don't break into his office and steal the paper. Okay, are they paying you for that time now? Because if not, I believe they're breaking labor laws. Now, OP mentioned it was a keycard system, so why don't they just redo the keycards so that only OP and maybe their direct supervisor have access to that office? Other people shouldn't be able to walk into somebody else's office and just take whatever they want. It's not a buffet, it's somebody's private space. Okay, it's time to get back to Bob. This one's titled Bob the Printer Does His Own Thing Again, but still, he lives. Let's jump right in. Another part of the ongoing reprographic saga. Well, it's been eventful these last couple of months. Ofsted didn't fail us, and Mick remained suspended. I gave my care and feeding of MFP speech to a couple of hundred grudging faculty. We're looking around for new printers for when our contract's up in October. All we have to do is keep Bob going till then. Unfortunately, he must know that, because he's not making things easy for us. It started typically with a minor fault with the inbuilt stapler this afternoon. It was kicking sheets out of alignment. All it needs is an engineer to perform a quick alignment, so we ring the non-emergency service number. Engineer comes out Thursday afternoon, adjusts the spindle assembly, and job done. Bob works all day Friday fine, and I shut up the office for the weekend with no inkling that the following Monday was going to suck any more than usual. I arrive on Monday morning to find my boss swearing a blue streak at Bob, who is conspicuously broken, judging by the red service light on the upper section. Any job being sent through Bob causes his user interface, where we manually set the job up, to freeze. Then, Bob crashes with an error code none of us have seen before, and doesn't appear in his tech guide. This warrants a service call, who, once they're convinced this is a new issue, tell us this is a critical error and not to use the machine. Since Bob isn't usable anyway, we attempt to shut him down. One of the less user-friendly features about Bob is that doing so is software-based, rather than a hard switch. Trying to shut him down causes only a crash restart. The actual power button will not switch a machine off, only a powered down machine on. But holding it down mid-crash at least makes it go to sleep. Bob will not switch off if he has a red service light. And so it's business as usual till that afternoon, until an engineer from the MFP team comes for a gossip. He's not qualified to work on a high-performance diva like Bob, so we don't ask. But mid-cuppa, his comments on what a POS Bob's model of printer is. To be honest, no one has a nice word to say about him. I guess we hurt Bob's feelings because he starts smelling properly hot. Engineer switches him off at the plug, and all is done to make sure that if it goes, then it won't take us with it, by moving toner canisters and paper boxes away. Some paper we use requires prepping by storing it next to the machine for 24 hours, Lord knows why. On Tuesday morning, the high-performance engineer comes. He's never seen the error message before, runs some diagnostics, and fiddles a bit. Nothing happens. He then announces that Bob is dead. I grieved. I really did. Especially because we're getting into exam season. Some more diagnostics, and it's eventually worked out that it's only Bob's finisher that is dead. His external paper module and print drum appear to still have some function. Naturally, this has to be tested, so Bob's finisher unit is taken off and wheeled away to be dealt with in a moment. For reference, this unit alone is about 2 feet long, 4 feet high, and 2 feet wide. This leaves us with the paper module and the processing unit, with a gaping hole where paper would normally travel through to the finisher. After cherry-picking a job that has no finishing but a decent number of pages, we set it up. Muggins here, myself, has to crouch in front of the hole, ready to catch the sheets as they come out. The author would like to inform you that this is a stupid idea. 1. The sheets were very hot. 2. The engineer admitted this wasn't health and safety friendly. And 3. The paper came out fast and went everywhere. Experiment over, he went back to knocking the finisher about. Fuses were replaced, the assemblies taken to bits, a lightly burnt board replaced, nothing worked. Because of what HSE would say about a gaping hole in moving parts, the finisher is reconnected. But after 7 hours of work and on the verge of giving up, the reconnected finisher springs to life after the engineer re-downloads some firmware. Somehow, adjusting that spindle had deleted firmware to 1/3 of the machine, possibly with the help of the burning board. Engineer departs, calling Bob a finicky piece of work. Big mistake. He now repeatedly jams in the external paper module. We haven't called the engineer out because it's paper and usually our problem. It's generally a stacking error. Some paper really does need to be stacked the right, shiny way up, or isn't prepped, or hasn't been fanned properly to remove excess dust or glue, or the wrong paper is used. Cheapo 75 grain rubbish. You get the picture. Basically, I'm finishing the day covered in white powder and toner, scratched to heck by being shoulder deep to unjam him. But Bob's still misbehaving. Just not enough for my boss to authorize a call out. He almost died this time, but we've still got till October to see what he throws at us this time. All of these callouts, you'd think that somebody would eventually sit back and go, okay, we're spending a lot of money on this printer, trying to keep it running. Maybe it's time to give them a brand new one, or even one that's refurbished that works better than Bob. I don't know how this is going to play out, but let's get into the last part of this one called, hey, we have no printers, so can we close early? I'm an idiot, and I'm now scared to prove it. Let's jump right in. Hi guys, it's your friendly, tolerated, no longer apprentice reprographer with another Bob-related chapter. And some sad news. I'm being made redundant, so Bob will probably outlast me. And I'll never know when he gets decommissioned by Cricket Bat. Last week, we had a meeting at our office with sales reps from Bob's manufacturers, talking replacements. This mainly meant my boss and colleagues schmoozed them while I worked my bum off, trying to run 3 high-performance machines on one of our busiest days. They made the mistake of asking whether we liked Bob whilst I was in earshot. I told them he was evil. They asked why, as his model is their most reliable, so I decided to show them. Honestly, Bob was magnificent. Jammed 8 times in 10 minutes. Big bad jams, so I had to get shoulder deep in the thing, watch off the lot. Funny noises, screaming like a demented budgie, 90 decibels so hard to ignore. Spat out unprinted paper, crashing software, the lot. This is why we call him Bob, I said, head inside the finisher unit. The rep asked me about the recently installed googly eyes. I find it's harder to smash something up when it's got a face. Right now, that's the only thing saving Bob. You could see the BS flow stop midstream from the sales rep's brain to mouth as she realized that we were not going to be convinced to have another Bob. They left not long after, promising to get back with other options. Hooray, I thought. At least someone will understand our problems and believe us when we say he needs sorting. But however badly, he is still working. Until, with a chugging like a shunting freight train, he suddenly didn't. Error reports everywhere, jams that were completely different to usual. One error report told us the first step in recovery was to switch the printer on. This error report was displayed on Bob, telling us to switch him on, whilst he was on. We rang for an engineer and were told there was no one qualified for Bob's model on duty in the south of England today, and to try and repair it any way we could ourselves, as we're certified basic techs, before calling them out. We asked for this in writing, then got that permission. And thus, I was introduced to printer field surgery. I've changed parts before, I've gutted a couple of MFDs, but not this. Bob's disposer was full of shredded paper. We'd pulled what we could out, laying it out on a table to work out what was still in there. The surgery would involve holding Bob's outflow shutter open, whilst putting my hand and a pair of tweezers fully inside his disposer, and poking around, pulling small pieces of paper from in and around the components. My boss offered advice in the form of the MASH theme tune, then went to clear some of our backlog on our other black and white machine. A minute later, I hear bang, bang, thump, and a fair amount of swearing. The backup machine has failed too, and by the sounds of it, it's pretty bad. Distracted, I then felt a thump and a lot of pain. Something I'd touched had set off the hole puncher in the disposer, which should not be operational in standby mode. The torch holding the door open merely rolled out of the way, and I got punched literally. One hole in the hand, not deep amazingly, and a fair amount of bruising up. I gave the job up and called the engineer out for both black and white machines for the next day, whilst raiding the first aid box. Not to be outdone, we heard a fizz from the other end of the room as the color machine gave up and suffered a power issue and died. All our machines were killed in action. I was hurt, my boss pissed off, and an ever-growing backlog of work was building. We asked if we could take off, as we were useless and were told the bosses didn't care if we sat and twiddled our thumbs. We were staying. So we made slightly defamatory Photoshop creations instead. Alright, so I had some fun with this one at the end, and I asked ChatGPT what they would do in this situation, and they gave me 5 suggestions. It says 1. Invest in a good set of cricket pads and a helmet to protect yourself from Bob's wrath. 2. Hire a stand-up comedian to perform for Bob in the hopes that it will lighten his mood and improve his performance. 3. Give Bob a daily dose of caffeine to see if it improves his energy levels. 4. Try bribing Bob with an endless supply of paper to keep him happy and prevent him from jamming. And 5. Create a Bob effigy and take out your frustrations by smashing it with a cricket bat, but be sure to do it outside of the office. Okay, so I can't agree with some of those, and some of those just don't make sense because, I mean, come on, we learned that Bob is obviously allergic to paper. And if you're gonna create an effigy and you're gonna beat the ever-loving crap out of it, you'd want to do it right in front of Bob, so that Bob can see what their eventual fate might be if they continue acting the way they are. This has been a wonderful 5-part series from Lampeter Ranger. Make sure you check them out in the description down below. I thank you for watching, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.